Welcome to the Drachnik and Friends official podcast, where we peel back the curtain on puzzle games and the people who make them. I'm Syrenne, the producer at Drachnik and Friends, and I'm joined as always by Alan Hazelden, the head Drachnik at Drachnik and Friends.
Hey there.
Today, we're joined by Zach Barth, who you may know from his work on games like Kaizen Factory Story, as well as Zachtronics games such as Opus Magnum. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Awesome. So for people who do not know you or your work, can you introduce yourself, and then how would you describe a Zach-like?
Yeah, I've made a bunch of games. Most of them were at a company called Zachtronics, which is named after me. So starting with like Space Chem, Infinifactory, TIS 100, Shenzhen.io, Opus Magnum, Exapunks, Last Call. They're all sort of in this genre that's now regrettably called Zach-likes. I don't know. I find myself almost using the term now. It's kind of embarrassing. But I guess Zachtronics was kind of embarrassing too. I didn't come up with the name Zach-like. It's not like I named these games after myself. It was somebody at Rock, Paper, Shotgun. But they're open-ended puzzle games. It turns out, I'm sure you guys have talked about this before, but puzzle game is a really useless descriptor of games. And so our games are, I guess, puzzle games, but they're very open-ended. They're not really like maybe puzzles to be like a real puzzle kind of have like one solution and like you walk a path to get there. But like with these games that I've worked on, they're like homework games. They're like a problem set.
That's not a good genre name.
Well, we don't have to stick with it, but it's like a problem set. It's like we invent a domain. Usually most of them are basically programming games. So we're inventing like a programming or engineering genre. And then we're giving you a problem set and asking you to practice and get very good at this set of tools. But they're extremely open-ended problems, kind of like the ones you encounter in programming. And you can solve them many different ways, which opens up this sort of secondary game of trying to optimize your solutions to be really good in certain ways and often really bad in other ways to account for how good they are at other things. So like a lot of the games, you can, like in Opus Magnum, you're making machines that glue together little molecules of fake alchemy molecules. And you can make a machine that's really fast. Like it really has like really high throughput and it glues all these marbles together faster than anybody can imagine. But you could also make one that's very cheap that uses the smallest number of parts. But usually because there's so few parts, it takes a very long time for those parts to do all this stuff. And so we have this kind of secondary optimization gameplay. We have histograms, which are, like we show the histograms, which is like a type of graph that shows distribution of numbers for everybody's scores for all of their solutions to a puzzle. And so it's like it's like a global leaderboard, except that you can actually make sense of it. And just instead of seeing just that there's, 100 or 1,000 people who cheated and have the best possible score and you're not one of them. So we have those sort of these histograms. We have friend leaderboards. People compete with their friends to play the games. You can, a lot of the games you can export like a GIF or some kind of artifact of your solution so that you can share it with people and show them how you accomplish such a highly optimum score. So these are all the hallmarks of a quote unquote Zach-like. So that's most of the games I've made are like that.
What was the process of kind of finding that sort of design spec?
Yeah, it was, I would just say like accidental iteration. Before all those games I rattled off before, I made some Flash games. And so this story is really silly, but so I made a game. So all these games, they kind of descend from watching a bunch of How It's Made, the TV show where they show how factories work. And when I was in college, I watched a bunch of the show. I'd never really seen it before. I wanted to make a game that was like how It's Made works, about making stuff in factories. And so I made a bunch of games that, like all these games all kind of descend from that. And I made one called The Codex of Alchemical Engineering, which is kind of the predecessor to Opus Magnum with the alchemy theme. And I was such a lazy programmer that I saved people's progress through the game. This is in Flash, but I didn't save their solutions. And so instead I was like, hey, if you want to hold on to your solutions, here's a button you can click that'll export like a base 64 string that you can copy into a text file and save on your own computer, which is crazy because like if I was base 64 in the solutions, I could have just stored it in a key value pair somewhere. And like made it automatically save people's solutions. So I don't know why I did this, where it saves to a text file, but for some reason I thought it was better. And in one way it was better. It let people share their solutions with each other in a way that was really quick and easy, and you could load somebody else's solution in and then like tweak it, right? If it was a screenshot, like Opus in the Codex of Chemical Engineering, if you took a screenshot of a solution, it would show you some of their solution, but not all of it. Like it wouldn't show you the programming for all the arms. And so it'd be really hard to share a solution with somebody via screenshots. But these little save strings that I made it really easy to share a whole solution with people. And so in addition to putting the game on Congregate, which had leaderboards, people could actually just like share their solutions to show how they achieved a score. And it created this sort of community in the forums on Congregate where people were like building off of each other. And so we saw what was happening there when we made Space Chem, which was like the first commercial game like this that I worked on, where I worked on it with a couple other people. I was like, oh, we should try to enable this thing that people are doing. And, you know, when we went on Steam, we gained friend leaderboards, which we hadn't had before, which are really compelling. We cooked up the histograms as a way to do global leaderboards that didn't suck and were less prone to cheating. And yeah, we just kind of gradually accumulated all these features. The idea of like really easily, like Space Chem, you could export a video of your solution to YouTube, which is pretty clunky. With Infinifactory, one of our players, they cut together a looping animated GIF of one of their factories running. And it's like, oh my God, like all these games are about doing the same thing over and over again. So GIF is the perfect format for that. And so we added like GIF support to Infinifactory and Opus Magnum. It was very, I would say like the launch of Opus Magnum, a lot of its success probably had to do with the GIFs. That this was back when Twitter was less dead and horrible. And so people were everybody, it felt like, were sharing GIFs with each other of their Opus Magnum solutions. And it was really great advertising for the game. And so again, like all these things we just sort of built up over time and accumulated and kept copying the things that worked from previous games. Kind of became a solid feature set.
Yeah, in some ways it's kind of funny that it took that many iterations to hit on like, oh, like just export a GIF. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, certainly Opus Magnum is when that like GIFiness like really felt like, oh yeah, this is just everywhere on my Twitter timeline.
Yeah. Oh, and Space Chem was like 2011. And so the GIFs have been around since the 80s or whatever, like 89, but like it didn't make as much sense then to do a GIF, you know? And so a lot of these games took place over many years. And so a lot of it is a reaction to like the communities and technologies that were dominant in those times.
I also think there's just something that like Opus Magnum is like the cleanest version of that concept of like, here's a shareable looping GIF that like you could have done that with Space Chem, but it wouldn't quite have hit the same way.
Yeah, so Space Chem has both big and little puzzles, and the big puzzles they don't really work as well in shareable format. Like Opus Magnum is all like little puzzles by comparison. So yeah, I don't know. It just works really well with Opus Magnum. Definitely. We added GIF support to our other games, and most of them never worked very well. Like Exapunks, we can show you a GIF of your solution, but it like doesn't show any of your code, so it's just a bunch of little programs running around, and it's like, yeah, maybe this is actually not compelling as a thing to share.
When you were designing Kaizen, I'm curious how much you were designing for that sense of like, oh, this should be like really compelling to watch a solution in action, or is that like just what was the primary design thinking going into it?
Yeah, so Kaizen was all about approachability, because so Kaizen was published by a publisher, and part of the deal was that they wanted us to make the most approachable Zach-like ever, right? Certainly at least as approachable as Opus Magnum. Like there's some scary games in the Zachtronics back catalog, right? And maybe there's some, if you're a publisher, there's concerns that some of them are too scary for normal people. And so our the thing that we agreed on, that was sort of the conditions that led to the game being made, was trying to make a really approachable, quote unquote, Zach-like that would have way more, not necessarily accessibility, but like approachability, that it's like scares fewer people away. And for us, that was a really interesting challenge, because we've gradually been trying to improve like the usability of our games, but we'd never really tried to make like somebody's first Zach-like that's going to bring them into the genre, right? Like if anything, like towards the end of Zachtronics, I was getting like just kind of burnt out, and it's just like, oh God, like I have these ideas, but like I can't be bothered to like fully explain them to everybody. Last Call is kind of this, right? Last Call hides behind this, oh, it's like games from the past when you had to read a manual, but you don't have the manual, so figuring it out is kind of part of the puzzle. It's like, no, I just couldn't be bothered to like explain every little bit of these things to people. Because it's just like, I don't know, it's hard to explain stuff to people. And like, you can't really tell things to people. Like, it's very difficult. But like, I wanted to do stuff that was like, just like what was in the game, like stuff that was kind of weird and challenging. And it's just like, yeah, people will just figure out how to play the Forbidden Path flesh, growing game. And it's like, I can't really explain it. Words don't really do it justice. You just have to kind of feel it. And I was able to kind of hide behind that with the way that the game was packaged together. But like, that's not really good design practice. You want people to be able to learn and play your games and get the most out of it, I think. And so Kaizen was a chance for us to really focus in on that and make a game that sort of like, I forget where I read this, but in instruction design, there's this idea of when you're teaching something to somebody, there's like necessary complexity and unnecessary complexity, which is that if you're teaching somebody algebra is challenging. And so there's a part of algebra that is just like unavoidable complexity. But then you can also make it worse, right? Like you could teach a class on algebra to people who predominantly speak English in Spanish. And that's just like avoidable complexity that makes everything worse. Like if you don't understand like the language it's being taught in. And so there's all these kinds of like, the task when you're trying to like teach people more effectively is to identify the stuff that doesn't have to be hard, and then you fix those things and then just try to expose just the unavoidable complexity. And so, yeah, it was a chance to kind of sort the two and figure out like what's actually the avoidable complexity. Like in Opus Magnum, there's a lot of, I don't know, I hesitate to call it depth, but like there's a lot to Opus Magnum that is about pipelining if you want to go fast, where you're finishing up a past solution while you start a new one. And then we were trying to think, it's like, is that really where like the interestingness of Opus Magnum comes from, like this pipelining? And so with Kaizen, we were like, what if we like kind of did away with the pipelining so you just make one product at a time? Like would that still be as interesting? Maybe it's a little less interesting in retrospect. I don't know. It's kind of subjective, but it's certainly a lot easier to explain to people when you don't have to explain like the tessellating code grid and all this stuff. And so, yeah, I know those were the things that we were kind of trying to focus on as our design goals with Kaizen.
Yeah, and like now that the game is shipped, congrats on that. Looking back and like reflecting on the design goal and specifically like where you feel like it really worked out and where you feel like maybe this did and maybe this didn't, it's a little subjective depending on the player. Like, how do you feel about the project overall now that it's done?
Yeah, the launch went okay. I feel like it is definitely the most approachable Zach-like that we've ever made. I think that's definitely true. I think it's unclear at this point whether that was the right business decision. I don't know. I mean, it's tough to. I've had a really hard time gauging the launch of this. The last time I launched a game was in 2022, so 3 years ago, and like Twitter was a little bit more usable back then, and certainly Opus Magnum, which came out in 2017, Twitter was way more prominent. And so with a lot, I feel like a lot of public internet spaces have kind of died out, and so it's really hard for me to. Like with Opus Magnum, we just looked at Twitter and we're like, wow, everybody on here is talking about the game. We must be doing well. Now I have no idea like how people are finding the game and like what, like what the response is, right? Like I can see like the Steam sales figures and that's it, right? And it's tough to tell like what the response is. So I end up looking at like Steam reviews, which is a terrible way to, find out what's going on, right? But like I would say 9 out of 10 of them are people who are like, yeah, this is fun. It's a little short and a little easy, but it's fine. I like it. Or people who are like, wow, this game's hard, but I like the challenge, which for me I think is crazy. But 1 out of 10 people are like, oh, this is a huge step back for Zach and Zachtronics team, and it's like way too easy. I beat the game in 15 minutes. And they're complaining about.
I was going to say that person's a genius.
Yeah, more like 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever. Especially the people who like hate the story and want to could not click through it faster. And So it's like, so I see these comments and it's just like, oh, this is unfortunately the only like contact I have with like customers playing my game is through Steam reviews. But, it's like, should the game have been less approachable? Like, I don't know, right?
Yeah.
One of the big lessons we learned a long time ago is that we made Spacechem. It was successful enough that it started Zachtronics. And then we're like, okay, so Spacechem doesn't look that great. And it's really hard to, like, the tutorialization in Spacechem was awful. Like, I'd never done anything like that before. It's a hard game to explain. And so the thinking on our team was like, oh, if Spacechem did that well while being like kind of ugly and impossible to learn to play, what if we made a game that like looked awesome and was easier to play? Like, surely we'd do way better. And so we did that. We made Ironclad Tactics, and it probably made like 1/10 or 1/20th of the money that Spacechem made. By now, probably even like less, like 1/30th maybe. I don't know. Like, making a game that was quote unquote more accessible did not help us because no one wanted to play the game. Like, the game sucked, It was not what people wanted. It wasn't compelling like Spacechem was. And so I feel like that was one of the very early lessons, is that just making stuff so that more people can play it doesn't mean that more people will play it. And there's obviously, I guess, some sort of sweet spot in between those two ends. Like, if you make a game that's really obscure and hard to play, that will probably hurt people from playing your game. But there's a sweet spot somewhere, and I don't know where it is. And I don't, even after doing Kaizen, we have this huge new data point. I still have no idea. Like, it's only been like a week and a half, So
Yeah.
I guess like a year from now, we'll know, I guess. But yeah.
Have you had a chance to like watch any streams or video playthroughs of the game?
Yeah, they play it.
But like, I would think, just personally, that because when a player is like streaming a game or like making a video about a game, like, they are inherently less focused. Like, they are not applying 100% focus to the game. They are applying maybe at best like 95% focus to the game.
Yeah.
That would be a really good like indicator of how successful the approachability is.
Yeah.
So like, I'm wondering, like, are the people that are like playing the game as you describe it like successful in playing the game?
Definitely. Yeah. I would say we did a lot of like in-office playtests with people who'd never seen the game before and are kind of overwhelmed by like being in our office and having us watch them. And yeah, I would say the game is successful at being approachable, but like we don't really get rewarded necessarily by the market for doing that.
The thing you'll never know is how much did the approachability affect
exactly
how the game sold. And like, that's like, short of a time machine, you'll never know that.
Exactly.
So I guess I'm more interested in like, how do you feel about the game and that lens on this game? Do you feel like, oh yeah, it was really nice to make a really approachable one of these?
It was, honestly, I don't really care either way. I've made so many games that every one of them is an experiment in some things that are interesting, but not like super interesting, right? It was interesting to make a game that was more approachable, and it would be just as interesting to make a game that's the opposite of approachable, right? It's just like, at some point, I've made so many games, right? Like, it's just like, it's just work, Not that I don't like doing it, but it's just like, they're all kind of mutually interchangeable, and it's fine. It was good to do, I guess. I like how the game turned out. I think it's cool that there exists a Zach-like that way more people can play and use as maybe like an entry point to some of the more intimidating ones, right? But like, if no one plays it, that doesn't matter. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of indifferent, I suppose.
Yeah, and I guess there's a few different angles on approachability, because like, one of them is like making sure the systems are like not like super weird. Like, you don't have to think about too many edge cases, like the throughput system you're talking about for Opus Magnum. Like, oh, it just needs to make a single copy, and you don't need to worry about resetting itself to the original state. Like, that's,
exactly.
That definitely makes it simpler. But another side of it is like, just what puzzles are you being asked to solve? And like, that is an area where like, you have more, like, you can, like, I know you just released some bonus puzzles. Like, you have the ability to release more bonus puzzles that are more or less approachable, or like more or less hard or demanding. Like, do you feel like you're steering that post-release content in any particular direction?
I certainly don't feel the need to make any of those puzzles easy anymore. So it's interesting. I want to say it was you, Alan, who said this, that a long time ago when we were talking about this game. And I was talking about how when I'm crafting a game, I want to make sure I never give somebody the same challenge twice in a row, right? That there always has to be something new. And then this kind of makes my games harder, that every puzzle you do, you're doing something that's like a new challenge, and you never get the opportunity to like have something that you just know how to do to like reinforce the fact that you know how to do it. And so I was like, oh no, every puzzle has to be different. I swear to God, it was like you who said, like, does it? Like, are you sure you can't just have like a puzzle that somebody knows how to do and just like reinforce? You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I
mean,
swear we had a meeting
that
early
sounds
on
like,
where you said that.
Something I could have said. Like,
that sounds extremely Alan. About like, if I am to put my best guess as to past Alan's words in his mouth, that basically he would argue that as long as it's fun, a reinforcement puzzle can be satisfying.
Yeah, so that's whatever wise person said this to me. That was something we explored a little bit with this game, and I felt like we always had even if we made a puzzle that was a little too easy or whatever, or not like a new enough challenge, you could always still optimize that puzzle. And so I tried to make it so that the progression of difficulty in the game was very gradual, but each puzzle was different enough from the previous ones that it felt like it would be a different kind of problem to optimize. And I think for the players who like optimizing stuff, they're finding lots to optimize in this game. And the fact that many players can optimize every puzzle in the game because they're all so approachable, I think is a win. But not every player is into optimization. And I think the players who aren't engaging with the optimization are finding it to be a very short and boring game.
Yeah, like when we were talking about like genre descriptors earlier, I kind of felt like in some ways optimization is at the core of like what makes your games like your games, right? Like some of them are about programming, some of them are about engineering, but the through line is the capacity for optimization.
Yes.
And yeah, it's super interesting to think about like what does a player engaging with this game look like if they don't want to engage with the optimization side? Like, does that as an experience hold together?
So in the past, it was, I would say, extremely difficult for most players to even beat one of our games, like let alone optimize any of it. Honestly, with Kaizen, it's still the case. Most players are not beating Kaizen. We have obviously, like the game just came out, so people are still working their way through it. But for a game that's like, supposedly so short, only 12% of our players have actually solved the final puzzle. So maybe that the 12% of people who get to the end are the ones who felt like it was too easy, and all the people who are still working towards it are the ones who felt like it was just like a reasonable challenge, just getting through the whole thing. I don't know. This is where like I feel like I'm really hampered by not actually having something. Not that reading Twitter was ever a good way to know what was going on in the world, but I really have no idea, right?
A fire hose of information.
Yeah, and it's just hard to know like what the response even is. I hang out on the Discord, but they're hardcore.
Yeah, you're feeling less engaged with the community of players playing your games.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty engaged with the small group of extremely hardcore people who are playing the games, but like, yeah, all the other people, I have no idea. I have no idea who those people are or what they think, and yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess this has always been a problem, but I feel it really acutely now, especially when we're trying to do something that's like supposed to be a reaction to players with like approachability angle. It's supposed to be a reaction to hypothetical people who in the past have bounced off of Zachtronics games because they were too unapproachable. And it's just like, is it working now? I have no idea. We did some in-office playtests, but that's not the same thing, Like I do not have a lot of data. And I think that's where maybe the only way we'll be able to tell is like, a year out, if the sales are really strong over the year, it's like, I guess we can assume that it worked. Maybe.
Yeah, what was playtesting like? You said a couple times that you invited some people in, but like, what was the process?
We do two kinds of playtesting. We do like your standard like Kleenex tester playtesting where you bring in somebody who's never seen the game before and then sit them down and watch them play the first, hour or two of it. That's how we refine like the pickup of all the mechanics. and all this stuff like that. Making sure that people, like, when they feel the need to click a button, can they find the button? Can they click the button? Do they actually click the button? Like, really, like, low level UX stuff like that. Kind of seeing where they get stuck in the tutorial. I think, like, you shouldn't get stuck in the tutorial. Like, that's not supposed to be the puzzle, is getting through the tutorial. And for a very long time in Kaizen, people were absolutely stumped by the tutorial, and I had to keep dumbing it down so that people would have the opportunity to learn how flipping works. Because it turns out that people are really all over the place with how well they understand what happens to, like, transform things when you flip them over. Some people get it instantly. I had a friend from high school who's never even played any of my games before, but he came out, he's a mechanical engineer, came out to Seattle, and I was like, oh, you should try my game. And he figured it out instantly because he's like a mechanical engineer. He designs gearboxes. He has a pretty good understanding of how, like, things translate and relate to each other physically. Whereas I had other people come in who had played Zachtronics games before and were just completely unable to wrap their head around what happens when you flip something over. And we had to keep dialing in the tutorial levels to make it more and more reliable for people to get through them. And there was also, like, a weird thing too, where in the first, this is, like, kind of maybe overly technical, but in the first chapter, we're trying to teach the basic mechanics. But that meant that we were kind of, like, leaning into complicated outcomes, like complicated emergent outcomes of using the basic mechanics. And then you get to chapter 2 and it teaches you new mechanics. And it's simple again, because they're just like, it's like cutting. For the first time you're learning about cutting, so it's a simple puzzle. And so we ended up in this weird case where the puzzles in chapter 1 were actually harder than the puzzles in chapter 2, because they were, like, going into complicated emergent behavior of, like, the first half of the mechanics. And we actually had to, like, back out all that emergent stuff and leave that for chapter 3 and make it so that chapter 1 is simple and chapter 2 is simple. And then, like, gradually towards the end of chapter 2 and into chapter 3 is when you finally start seeing these, like, emergent mechanics. And it took us a very long time to dial it in. And that was entirely through in-office playtesting. And then the second type of playtesting we do is, like, sort of like long-term playtesting, where we engage with people online, usually people who've played Zachtronics before, and then therefore can be counted on to like, actually play through much or all of the content. And then we just say, like, hey, play the whole game. Let us know, like, what puzzles are screwed up, what's too easy, what's too hard, what do you not understand, what bugs do you find? I'll let them do that. And then we track the metrics for that and kind of see, like, which puzzles are taking people too long and stuff like that. We do, like, pretty robust metrics collection on puzzles in our games. Yeah, so those are the two types of playtesting we do. We also collect data after launch, and so that's kind of like a third type of playtesting, which is looking at how do players progress through the game. Are there any puzzles that are sort of, like, really hard? The metric we track is what we call bounce rate, which is how many people get to a puzzle and then they're like, yeah, you know what, I think I'm done with this game, rather than solve it. And so we look for any puzzles that have sort of, like, really abnormally spiky bounce rates, because that's usually an indication that, like, something is wrong with the difficulty on that puzzle. Or at least that's what we think it is. So yeah, that's our main thing.
Yeah, I guess talking about bounce rates, certainly this one, and I think almost all of your previous games too, is, like, there's a very linear set of levels. Have you ever thought about, like, designing it so that the progression is more of a tree, so you can have harder puzzles earlier, but you don't need to solve them till you progress?
Not really. I've seen that in other games. I've never considered it. Our stuff's usually pretty story driven, so, like, the whole, like, the story is not necessarily, like, what the game is about, but is certainly what I'm hanging the whole design of it on. And so that's how I know what puzzles to make, is, like, well, which puzzle would be appropriate for this part in the story, and kind of trying to weave that together. I would say that's, like, one of my oddities as a game designer, is, like, really trying to hang all that stuff together. And so it just sort of makes less sense. I think you need to have a game where, like, the mechanics are a little bit more abstract, and then you can, like, introduce mechanics just, like, as new mechanics, and then, yeah, you, like, go deep on it in a branch. And I don't know. I've seen it before. I never really liked it in games. Like, so we've done in some of our games, we've let people, we'll unlock, like an Opus Magnum, we'll unlock a bunch of puzzles in the middle of a chapter to let them be done in any order. And people almost always just solve them in the order they're presented in the UI.
Yeah.
So to me, I kind of took that as a hint that, like, maybe it's not that important to let players mix it up. Like, they're all puzzles. It doesn't really matter. You have to get through all of them to get through the game, right? So it didn't really seem to matter that much.
Speaking of story, I consider the choice to open the game with a fairly lengthy dance mini game.
It's 1 minute. It's 1 minute
it
long.
It feels like more.
Yeah.
Divisive.
Yeah, no, a bunch of people, when the demo came out, that was in the demo, and there was a bunch of comments on Steam talking about how they stopped playing the demo as soon as it asked them to do the dance game. And it's just like, are you kidding me? Like, yeah, I mean, I guess I get it, right? That it's like, well, it's not what you thought you were going to get, and some people just can't handle that. I don't know. Yeah, we thought it was important for the story. It doesn't make sense later in the game. Yeah, it was meant to like evoke like the story beats, which apparently some people don't give a shit about. So, yeah.
Unfortunate, but so it goes.
Yeah. I don't know. I think anybody who couldn't make it through a minute of the dance game and like truly noped out at that point, like how much further were they really going to get through the game? You know, the game is nothing but asking you to do stupid stuff, you know? Like
that's one way to think about it, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We had an Exapunks. Exapunks starts with a little activity where you have to transcribe a receipt because it's like a story beat. And it's like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I didn't really see that many people complain about transcribing the receipt. Maybe it was like a very small number of people. We actually like we put some metrics into Exapunks to make sure that people weren't actually quitting the game and refunding it when they saw the receipt entry thing. And the metrics were like, no, most people are not stopping at that point. It's fine. So I figured with the dance game, it would also be fine that it's like, yeah, it's like a minute-long activity that kind of gets the story started. But the dance game was way more divisive than I expected it to be. Like, I'm certainly not going to do that again, right? But I'm not going to take it out just because some people complained about it.
Yeah, I think for me, it like sets weird expectations about what the game you're about to play is.
Like what?
Like, if you're just playing this for like... or if you don't know much about the game and then you sit down in front of it and then that's the first thing you play, then you are going to be surprised when it then goes to that stuff. And now the number of people who are going to sit down in front of this game without some level of expectations of what it is like probably a small number. But I still think that like I guess it feels slightly uncohesive to me. And maybe that's a sign that I don't value the story as much as other people might.
Yeah, that's... Alan doesn't like stories in video games usually, so...
I like cohesive stories.
Told through gameplay exclusively.
The overall story in Kaizen, like, yeah, there's like a bit more dialogue than I would like, but like it feels cohesive with the overall thing. Like,
okay.
that side of it, like I can see structurally how it supports the game. Like I have no problem with there being story in Kaizen. I just feel like the DDR game doesn't support that story enough to justify its inclusion right at the start of the game, in my opinion.
So we were hoping it would make people feel a little surprised and like a fish out of water, because that's what the story is about. So that was what like the goal was with that. But I mean, the stuff you're saying is people have said that about the story in general, right? Like there's a decent number of people who complain about there being a story in the game. I don't know what to tell them. Like, play a different game if you hate it so much. I don't know. Like, all of our games have weird shit like this in it, right? The solitaire games, like, there's people complaining about the fact that we have solitaire games and that you need to play the solitaire games to get the achievements and that they have to get the achievements, right? There's
people they gotta get the achievements.
Yeah, I don't know. There's our games are always filled with like stuff that is weird and you might not put in like the good version of the game. I don't know. Like it didn't fail that badly during testing. If anything, the thing that everybody hated during testing was the fact that you can't, while you're playing the dance game, you can't look at all the people dancing. That was the problem. That was the feedback we got. We had to add a little picture of him dancing right next to where it's actually really hard to like show people stuff going on while you're playing a rhythm game, it turns out. Yeah. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be, but yeah, so that was the thing that everybody gave us feedback about. Nobody was just like, "Oh, this is ruining the cohesiveness of the experience for me," you know? I don't know.
That's,
like,
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, like
I'm curious, both for this game and for previous games, how tricky has it been to get the story right?
Not tricky? I don't know. Well, it depends what you mean by right. I mean, like, according to some people, we got the story wrong in
No,
this
I
game.
mean, I guess to hit your standards for like, because I feel like in some games for some creators, you can have something which is a great gameplay system, and then you try to add a little bit of story, and then that story, like getting the story to fit with the game and the game to fit with the story is way more work than expected. But it sounds like you don't have that problem with these games. You just kind of have this sense of like, oh, this kind of story structure will work. Like, this is the rough arc of a story. We'll just write it and we'll make the puzzles and we'll stick them together and it will work.
Yeah. So the process for most of our games is to we start off with like what's like the core idea of what you're doing in the game and what's the core idea of the story, and then from there the two just kind of get made to reinforce each other. Like every puzzle starts with a small pitch for like what is the story of that puzzle, you know? And sometimes it's like, oh, I have a cool idea for a puzzle mechanically that we need to like shoehorn into a story. But usually it's starting with a story beat and then turning that story beat into a puzzle that evokes that story beat. So I mean, because our process is so built around this, it's usually not that hard to make it work.
Yeah. I can't remember. Did Codex of Alchemical Engineering have a story?
So that was just me by myself a very long time ago. It has like little cryptic, like all my games from back then have like little cryptic story beats in them. Like little, like I'm not a writer, but it has like little notes about like alchemy or something. It's supposed to be like a book. Like the whole game is themed as if it's like a book because it's like the codex, right? So like a book has like notes in it, like a book or something. Like Constructor has, like the other games from that period have maybe like slightly stronger narratives. Like the Bureau of Steam Engineering is all about the Civil War, but with robots, which later turned to, we remade as Ironclad Tactics. Constructor is like some sort of like alternate universe where like America went communist during the Cold War or something. It's really stupid, as told by like TV Guide like entries or something. It's very stupid. And then yeah, I don't know. They all have Ruck Engineer. Like, so I made this game. One of my early games is the one that started like all the Zachtronics games being things that people knew about and played because it got on Hackaday. That has live action cutscenes that I recorded.
Oh, wow.
But there's no voice because I'm not a good actor. So they're all dubbed over with like little like comics. Like the video will pause and like a little comic book speech bubble pops up. And it's so silly. It's like me. You can see me like right out of college running around like the woods near my house filming these little cutscenes. Yeah, so it's yeah. There's like there's always been like a really heavy story in all of my puzzle games. Otherwise, like if you don't have a strong story, how do you know what kind of puzzles to make? Right? Like what kind of crazy person would just make puzzles in isolation, where they're just like, oh, look at this clever puzzle.
No comment.
You're on the wrong podcast to ask that question, unfortunately, Zach.
Yeah, well, see, that's why I don't really think of myself as like a puzzle guy or like a puzzle designer, because they're like a different kind of thing. I don't know. Whenever I make puzzles, usually I don't know the answer to it, or even if there is an answer, it's just kind of like, it feels like there's probably an answer to this, and then you like try and solve it and see like, was there an answer to this? Like, is it interesting? Yeah, that's the Zachtronics. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've never even played the last level of Space Chem. I just figured it was doable. We had playtesters play it. One of them managed to beat it, and it's like, okay, I guess it's doable and probably the right difficulty. Back then, I used to think that games had to be really hard because I would have all these people who'd be really good at my games, and it's like, okay, the last level in a game should challenge even the people who are best at it. And so that's how you get Space Chem with the last level. Like, I'm not the best person at my games. I'm not the best person of Space Chem. A lot of Space Chem players are way better than me. So the last level is for them, not for me. I don't design games quite like that anymore, but that was how I used to design games. But I still design stuff where it's more sort of like theoretical design. It's like, this ought to be, within this system of tools, this ought to be solvable. And then I'll like test it out myself to make sure it's true.
Yeah, I think there's something about the type of puzzle that your kind of games make. Like a lot of the puzzles I make are like about something, and like every possible solution to this puzzle needs to have this key moment or the puzzle has failed in its approach. So like
Yeah.
I'm getting more inspired by the mechanics than the world or the setting. But I don't think that approach really works the same way when the puzzle is not like do this thing, but like do this thing optimally or like do this thing efficiently.
Yeah. All my games are really about computation, right? And computability. And so there's like a thing. Do either one of you have a computer science degree?
Mm-hmm.
So they make you take a class about like computational models and like Turing machines versus automata and stuff.
Yeah, and that's how you get Manufactoria.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a game that's literally about Turing machines. Yeah. So all the Zachtronics games, like all these Zach likes, for me they originated in a little Java program called JFlap, which is a program that we used in a computation class I took in college, where you can model like Turing machines and automata. And our homework was make an automata that parses this string or this type of string. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I want to make games like this. And then all the games I've made since then are just JFlap the game, JFlap with a story. They're all about like computational models and stuff like that. And so I think that's what enables it to be like this puzzle is about like a certain, like not as, like it's kind of related to the thing you're talking about, like, oh, like it evokes a certain mechanic, but it's like, oh, this like evokes like a certain space of computability or like capabilities and stuff like that. So it's similar, but just much more open ended, right? Because the tools are so open ended, and because it's like computing, I can be like, okay, if you want to solve this problem, you're going to need to use memory, right? Because we know, like in Shenzhen.io, you have these like little microcontrollers. They don't have enough registers to store all the data that I know you need to keep like in your working set to solve this puzzle. So you're going to have to use a RAM chip, and that's what this puzzle is about. Is like, how do you use a RAM chip to do this type of thing? And it's like, how do you use a RAM chip for something that's O of n versus how to use a RAM chip for something that's O of n squared. And so I can like kind of eyeball like all these like things, these qualities, and make puzzles about it. But they're still highly open ended because there's a lot of specific. There's many specific ways to get there in terms of like which instruction do you place in which slot of which CPU, right? And so it has this like second level where all the possibilities and impossibilities take place, rather than a game that's more about like placing stuff on like a specific grid, like symbols games and stuff.
Yeah, actually, I want to push on something here because you said that a lot of your puzzle inspiration will be based on like the story and like what's a like sensible thing to make at this point in the story.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does that fit with the design approach of wanting all of the puzzles to feel really unique? Like, surely that means that sometimes you have story ideas, but they end up in gameplay feeling too similar, or
no, we only do things that satisfy both sides of it, right? So like if I like one, like the counter example I'll start with first is like we needed an extra puzzle in chapter 2 that had flipping in it. So I was like, okay, what's something that would have like a second, like a part that's used twice that gets flipped? And it's like, oh, like a bun, like with directionality. It's like, well, maybe we could do like a hamburger. And so I wandered over to Matthew's desk. I was like, hey, can we write a story for a hamburger? And he's like, yeah, sure. So he like banged out a story for a hamburger that fits with the story. And so that was easy. That was very much like the rare example of it coming from the design side. The other version of it is that specifically with Kaizen, I did a bunch of like searching and came up with a huge list of products that would have been made in Japan in the 80s that were like some iconic, some not, but just did a whole bunch of research. And then we went through those and picked the ones that seemed promising. And I like tried to sketch out pictures to make sure that we could make stuff that looks like puzzles for them. And then Matthew sat down and kind of wrote stories and tried to make it work. And, like it kind of, I don't know, like the stuff that wouldn't have worked for, I'm trying to think if there was any puzzles I had that didn't work story-wise. You can kind of write anything, like at that point we'd already nailed down like what's the framework of the story.
I kind of want to go back real quick to something that you mentioned offhand, And I'm sure that you've told this story a million different places, but maybe our podcast audience hasn't fully heard it. Why do all your games have solitaire?
Oh, because they're fun to make. So when we were doing Shenzhen IO, um, the conceit for it all, I think it was the first one we did. Like it was a virtual desktop. We're like, okay, it's a game about making circuit boards in China in a modern day or like near future. Like, what is the interface for this game looks like? And it's like, well, people use computers to do that, so it probably just looks like a computer. And like TIS 100 had a computer interface, but it was like this really like kind of old school kind of DOS like one. And we're like, no, we just need something that looks like Windows or whatever. And so we designed like our little desktop environment where all this stuff takes place. And it was just like, oh, if we have a fake operating system, we should make a solitaire game, because everybody knows that good operating systems come with solitaire. And I had a deck of cards for a game called Ming, it's kind of like Mahjong turned into a card game for Western audiences. It's from like the 70s or 80s. Because like Mahjong is actually quite complicated. And so it was somebody who was like clearly inspired by like the aesthetics and the rules of Mahjong, but wanted to make it something that like Americans who were familiar with Rummy could play. Because Mahjong and Rummy are kind of similar games. And so I found a copy of this game, having never heard of it before, at a thrift store. And so I had these cards, and I was like, oh, I should make a solitaire game that you play with these Ming, like Mahjong cards. And so I was playing Free Cell at the time a lot. I never knew how to play Free Cell, but my wife knew how to play Free Cell. And so at one point we had instead of like a TV, we had a computer and a projector. And so she would like, after we watched TV, she'd like play Free Cell on it. And I was like, okay, you need to teach me how to play Free Cell. And she taught me how to play Free Cell. I was like, wow, this is way better than Klondike. This is like a great solitaire game. And so really the goal with Shenzhen Solitaire was just like, can I do Free Cell with these Ming cards? And that made the solitaire game. And so we shipped that with Shenzhen IO, and lots of people joked. They're like, oh, like this is a great solitaire game. I guess there's also a puzzle game attached to it, 10 out of 10. And so we saw all these comments of all these people responding positively to the solitaire game. And so when it came time to make our next game, which was Opus Magnum, I was like, oh, actually, specifically, before it was Opus Magnum, we were working on this thing called Typhoon, which was like an open world. It was like an open world, like harvesting and like submarine building game that we worked on for a couple of months because we wanted to make a popular game. And I was more excited in that Typhoon game about I was like, oh, I'll have 3 solitaire games instead of 1. I was more excited about the solitaire games and the programming language that you use to automate your submarines, and not like fighting fish or whatever the fuck you'd be doing. And so I was like, this sucks. Let's just make a puzzle game, because that's what I want to be making. And so we made Opus Magnum instead. I was like, well, it needs to have a solitaire game. And so we were just getting into like hex encounter war games. So we'd been playing Napoleon and Waterloo, which is like a really old hex encounter war game in the office. And so I was like, oh, I want to try making like a little war game. And so I spent a bunch of time working on like a little solitaire war game for Opus Magnum, which you can play in Zach, which is like the Steam version of my book. But people weren't really understanding how to play. I think it's pretty good, but no one ever understood how to play. And so like after kind of giving up on that, like in a fit of rage, I very quickly designed Sigmar's Garden, which is like one of the best solitaire games I've ever done. And the Sigmar's Garden was really cool because it kind of acted as like a tutorial for teaching people and reinforcing what all the different elements in the games are. So it's like, wow, this like synergizes really well. And so then we released that with Opus Magnum, and people love Sigmar's Garden. And at that point, it's like, okay, we've done it twice. Now I clearly have to do this in every game. And so we do. And I don't know, it's fun. I feel like when we spend like even a year working on a game, I get really bored just working on that one game. And I don't really do game jams or things like that because they take a lot of energy. I don't want to like spend a lot of energy making something that I can't like sell and release, like it's less appealing to me. So I'll make these little solitaire games as little game design experiments within a game that I'm working on. And they're really fun, and people like some of them, not all of them, but some of them. People don't seem to like Pachinko Solitaire very much, but I like it.
Well, not everything has to be for everyone.
Well, you say that, but when you sell games, you kind of want them to be for everybody.
You want them to be for as many people as possible, of course.
Yeah, but
that's,
you don't always
that's what
get
the approachability of the main game is for.
Yeah. So, well, and the funny thing is that pachinko solitaire, people's main complaint is that it's too random. And
That's pachinko.
like pachinko, yeah. So it was actually really hard to turn pachinko into something that felt like pachinko but wasn't so random. And in the end, it's still too random, I guess. But I like it. Some people like it.
Before we wrap up, do you have any questions for us?
You told me I was supposed to prepare questions for you guys, and I'll be honest, I totally forgot about that and don't have any questions. Fine. Yeah, I don't really. I'm trying to think of what I know. You make like real puzzle games. I don't.
However you define real.
Well, like ones where they have like a solution, right? Like the thing that Alan was talking about, right? Where it's like you try to get at specific mechanics things and create puzzles that have like...
Yeah,
you try to have one solution, or like do you ever have multiple solutions?
Oh, there's multiple solution puzzles.
Okay.
Often there's multiple solutions, but they are broadly the same class of solution.
Okay, that makes sense.
A lot of the work back on a Dracneck puzzle is like what is the experience or reinforcement that you're trying to give the player?
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, I don't know. I'm not really into puzzle games that much, if I'm being honest.
No. Let's stick on solitaire games. Have you played Hempuli's Solitaire Collection?
I have. I played it earlier. I don't know what it ended up being when it released. I played some of those. Yeah,
probably ended up with like twice as many solitaire variations as the one you played.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah, I didn't like it. I thought a lot of them didn't work.
Is that because you're too much of a solitaire connoisseur, or?
No, I just didn't really understand any of them, and they just didn't. I don't know. I didn't really get any of them, and I sort of was expecting to get them more. I don't know. I don't.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was an early version. I played quite a bit of them, but yeah, I never found one that I liked. I don't know. Did you play it?
I didn't play the release version. I played several like as he was making them. And like I'm not really a solitaire person, so like I appreciated the design variety there.
Yeah.
Like I think he that anthology I think takes solitaire to some weirder places than your solitaire games have. Which like as a game designer, like I appreciate the weirdness more than I appreciate the solitaire.
Yeah. I think it's totally possible that the version I played was too early and they were still just like sketches of ideas rather than things that are refined. Like we spend like an inappropriate amount of time trying to refine our solitaire games into things that are like properly solvable. Like the line between like a good solitaire game and a bad solitaire game is really hard to judge, because like I feel like they have to, like it's very possible to make a solitaire game that doesn't feel actionable at the start, and that's like really bad, right? Like in my mind, like a good solitaire game, like at the beginning of the game there's obvious moves to start making so that you can feel like you're making progress, and then like you're constantly looking for patterns and making decisions as you go, but you have to like not overwhelm people, especially if you're playing like a totally open solitaire game where all the cards are revealed. Like it's actually quite tough. And I think this is one of the things that works really well about Shenzhen Solitaire is that all the cards are face up at the beginning, which is a little intimidating, but you'll see lots of moves to make at the beginning, and they're all safe moves. Like you can't like screw yourself by moving like a black 6 onto a red 7. Like that's fine, And so I guess like maybe there's like, if there's like a green 6 you should have moved over, like that's possible. But like for the most part, like there's safe moves to make, and it makes you kind of like, you make some safe moves, you get a little invested in the game, and it helps that when you get stuck, you've at least made some progress into it that's like definitely a good step forward. And so like you want to have like that quality to it. And I don't know, it's a weird, it's not like I have rules for making a solitaire game, but there's like a feel thing that I think is quite hard to get right. And not every, like, I don't know, whenever I'm making one of these, I'll try lots of things, and lots of the things I try do not work at all. And then, when I find something that works, I try to refine it a bunch. And I've been doing like, it's actually one of the things there was an article that where somebody interviewed him probably about solitaire games, and he was like guessing about how mine are made and like how they're are they all solvable or not, and like he had seen me talk about how like some of the, like the ones I've made are guaranteed solvable, and he's just like, whatever, and it's it's the randomness of solitaire is like a whole thing too, right? Like some of our solitaires, if you actually deal them out randomly, are so unlikely to be won that we had to write solvers and give people guaranteed solvable games. Whereas some of them, like Shenzhen Solitaire, is almost always winnable when dealt out randomly. So it doesn't really matter if we give somebody an unwinnable deal because it's so rare that maybe they just screwed up. Who knows? But I've been doing a lot of things lately, and maybe this is like a thing you don't want to talk about, is that like kind of like fudging the randomness to make the game better. Like in Shenzhen and in Sawayama Solitaire and Last Call BBS, it deals out 3 cards at a time, and it's mostly random, except that it's actually possible to deal out sometimes 3 cards that totally screws the player. And so I like in playing the game a lot, kind of realized it's like, oh, it's really not fun when this happens. And so I like detect when that happens and then like rearrange the cards silently just to make sure that it's not like the worst version of it. And so I've been experimenting with stuff like that. Like the Pachinko Solitaire has a huge amount of, because it's based on Golf Solitaire, which is actually an incredibly random and unfair solitaire. And so like when like the Great Alien games, they've done a bunch of Golf Solitaires. And so they have like all kinds of power-ups you can use to like ameliorate the randomness of it. But with this, like I just kind of like fudged some numbers sometimes and like fudge the RNG a little bit sometimes to make it less just like unfun. But like now you're getting really deep into like, totally manipulating the player and their experience. And it's maybe a bad thing. I don't know.
I think you should make a programming game that's about solitaire. Like you could be programming an AI to play a solitaire game, or you could be programming a solitaire to deal out the best or worst possible deck.
So in Exapunks, I was going to have that. The motto of Exapunks was hack everything. And so I was going to have it be that you program an AI to play the mini games in it. And just incredibly unfun. Actually, it turns out writing solitaire AIs is not fun. It's really hard. And like most people, I don't think could just do it naively off the top of their head if they didn't know how to solve a problem like that. And it requires a shitload of memory, which is never present in any of our programming game models. So yeah, we've definitely seriously considered that for Exapunks. And we're like, no, actually, that would be terrible. Never mind. Like I have to write solvers for our solitaires sometimes, and I hate doing it, and it's hard.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Well, thank you so much again for jumping on and recording with us.
Yeah, this is great. This is really fun.
Where can people find you online?
We're on the internet. You can buy Kaizen, A Factory Story on Steam. Yep. You can check out our website at coincidence.games, as in it's a coincidence that all the people from Zachtronics went and started a new studio together.
What a coincidence.
Yep, coincidence.games, just spelled normally. We have Kaizen is out, obviously, but we also have, I've been experimenting with physical games. So we did like 2 card games that you can buy. We have a scratch off. I made like a scratch and solve puzzle pack, which is a bunch of scratch off games.
Is that still going to be backable when this podcast comes out?
Yeah, you can back it now up until it's still. I mean, so it's July right now, the end of July when we're recording this.
This will be coming out in September.
Okay, yeah, it'll still be backable in September. It's going to be backable right up to the point where we get them and ship them, which probably won't be till like the end of the year. It's been difficult to get the scratch off manufacturing just right. So it turns out they're hard to make.
Wouldn't you know it? I'm guessing most of the supply is going to lottery tickets.
Well, it's weird because there are companies. There's 2 in the U.S. There's 2 companies that make scratch off lottery tickets, but they don't really do other stuff. And so, like, we're getting this manufactured by a board game manufacturer, and so it's actually like totally different process-wise. Because the lottery companies have to worry about fraud, and so it's like its own weird supply chain, and we have nothing to do with that supply chain. So
no, that makes a ton of sense. I have so many weird one-off manufacturing complication stories that like I'm sure I could have another podcast for you about. Hey, did you know that like if you want a classic wax sealed trading card, there's only one guy in the whole country in the United States that still has a machine that can do it, and he lives in a cabin in Vermont.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I love manufacturing. I mean, it's all awful, but it's fun too.
Yeah, it's like, okay, I'm happy for you, dude. You're the only dude in the whole country that still has a machine that does that.
We had floppy disks manufactured a couple of years ago. That was
Oh, yeah.
wild.
Oh yeah. Oh, any retro media, any retro physical anything. We were trying for a project that didn't end up happening. I was trying to get like a 1930s tin toy. That's a nightmare because we were trying to do it at scale.
Oh God.
Yeah.
Just get a time machine and outsource it to people in the past.
Exactly. If I could just go back 100 years, this would be the easiest thing to manufacture in the world because they were being made for pennies.
That's funny.
And now it was going to be like, all right, it's going to be $50 a unit. I'm like, no. All right. Anyways.
Yes. Yep. Check us out.
Yes. Thank you. Like Zach said, Kaizen Factory Story available now on Steam.
Yep. It's approachable.
It's very approachable. If you got worried about hearing like programming solitaire AI solvers, I can vouch. Kaizen is nothing like that. You should go, really good. Check it out. It's a lot of fun. Thank you again, Zach.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you for listening to the Drachneck and Friends official podcast. Our music is by Priscilla Snow, who you can find at ghoulnoise.bandcamp.com. Our podcast artwork is by Adam DeGrandis. Our podcast is edited by Melanie Zawodniak. Please rate and review us on your podcast service of choice, and be sure to tune in next episode for more interesting conversations.